6 months after the invasion began, the war that Admiral Vex Korath had expected to win in days had transformed into something unrecognizable. The Zeltharian Empire, which had conquered 17 worlds through overwhelming technological superiority, now faced an enemy that had not only matched their technology, but was actively surpassing it in ways that defied Imperial understanding. General Kevin Burke stood in the command center of the newly constructed Fort Liberty, a military complex, built entirely underground using a combination of human engineering and captured alien technology. The facility would have been impossible to build 6 months ago, but human engineers had learned to think in ways that amazed even themselves. "Status report," Kevin requested from his staff officers. "Sir, Operation Thunderbolt is ready to commence," Colonel Amy Foster replied. "We have 12 battle groups positioned around the primary Zeltharian stronghold in New York. Each group is equipped with the new Mark 7 hybrid weapons and the latest shield generators." The Mark 7 weapons represented the culmination of human innovation under pressure. Dr. Peterson's teams had not only reverse-engineered Zeltharian technology, but had improved it by applying human problem-solving methods. The weapons were more efficient, more reliable, and more powerful than the original alien designs. "What about enemy reinforcements?" Kevin asked. "Intelligence indicates that Admiral Vex Korath has received additional ships from the Zeltharian homeworld," reported Major Chris Taylor. "However, our space-based forces are ready to intercept any vessels attempting to reach Earth's surface." The human space fleet had grown from a handful of modified civilian ships into a formidable force that operated throughout the solar system. Commander Lisa Chen's pilots had learned to fight in three-dimensional space, using tactics that treated gravity, asteroids, and planetary orbits as weapons rather than obstacles. Kevin studied the tactical displays showing Zeltharian positions across North America. The aliens still controlled major cities, but their control was becoming increasingly fragile. Human forces had learned to move through urban environments like water, flowing around alien strongholds and striking at supply lines and communication networks. "Begin Operation Thunderbolt," Kevin ordered. The attack on the New York stronghold began with something the Zeltharians had never experienced, a coordinated assault that used their own tactical doctrines against them. Human forces approached from multiple directions using perfect military formation and disciplined fire control, exactly as Imperial training manuals recommended. The Zeltharian defenders prepared to repel the attack using standard defensive protocols that had proven successful for centuries. They concentrated their firepower on the most logical approach routes, established overlapping fields of fire, and waited for the primitive human forces to break against their superior technology. Instead, the human attack was a demonstration of how much the species had learned. The approaching forces used formation tactics that looked familiar, but were subtly modified to account for human capabilities. They advanced with the precision of Imperial troops, but with the creativity that marked every human military operation. Captain Julie Henderson led the 5th Assault Battalion through the ruins of Manhattan's financial district. Her soldiers moved with the confidence of troops who had been fighting superior technology for months and had learned not just to survive, but to win. Their hybrid weapons could penetrate any Zeltharian armor. Their shields could withstand direct hits from alien artillery, and their tactical coordination rivaled that of Imperial veterans. "Contact front," her communications specialist reported. "Zeltharian defensive line approximately 200 meters ahead." Julie signaled for her troops to take position, then activated the new tactical system that connected every human soldier through an advanced network based on alien technology, but designed according to human principles. Instead of the rigid command structure used by Zeltharian forces, the network allowed every soldier to share information and coordinate actions in real time. The result was a fighting force that combined the best aspects of both species. Human creativity and adaptability merged with alien technology to create soldiers who were more effective than either species could produce alone. The assault on the Zeltharian positions began with precision artillery fire from hybrid weapons that had been positioned using alien sensors but targeted using human intuition. The defenders responded with their own artillery, but human forces were no longer where alien tactical computers predicted they would be. Julie's battalion advanced through the destruction using movement techniques that had evolved from months of urban warfare. They flowed around obstacles like liquid, concentrated at weak points like a laser beam, and struck with the sudden violence that had become the trademark of human military operations. Meanwhile, in orbit around Earth, the space battle that would determine the war's outcome was beginning. Admiral Vex Korath had committed his remaining fleet to one final assault on the human homeworld, confident that superior numbers and technology would finally break the stubborn resistance. Captain Julia Morgan commanded the hybrid battleship Defiance from her position near the moon's orbit. Her ship was a perfect example of human engineering principles applied to alien technology. It looked crude and improvised compared to the elegant Zeltharian vessels, but it packed more firepower than ships twice its size. Zeltharian fleet approaching from Sector 4, her tactical officer reported. 12 heavy cruisers and 6 dreadnoughts, standard Imperial formation. Julia smiled grimly as she studied the enemy formation. The Zeltharians were still fighting the war they understood, massive ships in perfect formation, overwhelming firepower applied through disciplined coordination. They had not learned that humans had evolved beyond the species they had originally invaded. Signal the fleet, Julia ordered. Execute pattern Delta. The human space fleet scattered in all directions, abandoning traditional formation flying. For the chaotic tactics that had proven so successful throughout the war, each ship became an independent unit, free to maneuver as conditions required while remaining connected to the overall battle plan through the hybrid communication network. The space battle that followed would later be studied by military historians as a perfect example of adaptation, overcoming technological superiority. The Zeltharian fleet fought with the precision and coordination that had conquered 17 worlds. The human fleet fought with creativity, unpredictability, and weapons that should not have existed, but performed beyond all expectations. Dr. Peterson watched the battle from his laboratory deep underground, monitoring the performance of weapons systems that had been theoretical concepts just months before. Rachel, are you seeing these power readings? He asked his colleague. The Mark 7 systems are operating at 112% of theoretical maximum, Dr. Kim replied. According to Zeltharian science, that should be impossible. According to human engineering, impossible is just another design challenge, Alex responded, already working on improvements to systems that were currently winning the war. The space battle ended with the Zeltharian fleet in full retreat. Admiral Vex Korath, for the first time in his long career, ordered a withdrawal from a system his empire had been sent to conquer. His remaining ships limped back toward Zeltharian space, carrying news that would shake the empire to its foundations. On Earth's surface, General Kevin Burke received reports of victory from all sectors. The coordinated assault had broken Zeltharian resistance across the planet. Enemy strongholds were surrendering or being abandoned as alien forces realized they could no longer match human military capabilities. Sir, Colonel Foster reported, we're receiving surrender requests from Zeltharian commanders on 3 continents. They're asking for safe passage off-planet in exchange for leaving behind all military equipment. Kevin considered the request carefully. 6 months ago, such an offer would have seemed like a miraculous salvation. Now, with human forces clearly winning the war, it represented something different, proof that the species that had thought conquest would be easy had learned to respect their intended victims. Grant them safe passage, Kevin decided, but make sure they understand that Earth is now defended by forces that won't be surprised again. The war was ending, but its effects on humanity would last forever. The species that had been divided and primitive 6 months ago had become something unprecedented in the galaxy. A unified civilization that could not only survive contact with superior alien technology, but could master it, improve it, and use it to defend their homeworld against any future threats. 3 months into what Admiral Vex Korath had expected to be a week-long conquest, the Zeltharian Empire faced something it had never encountered before, a species that became more dangerous the longer they fought. The human resistance had evolved from desperate defensive actions into coordinated offensive operations that defied every principle of Zeltharian military doctrine. Commander Lisa Chen stood in the modified cargo bay of the converted freighter New Freedom and watched her pilots prepare for their latest mission. 6 months ago, she had been flying commercial transport routes between Earth and the Moon. Now she commanded a squadron of hybrid fighters that combined human engineering with captured alien technology in ways that baffled their creators. "Listen up, people," Lisa addressed her pilots. "Intelligence reports show a Zeltharian supply convoy moving through Sector 7. They're using the same route they've used for the past 2 weeks because they think we can't reach them there." Her lead pilot, Captain Tony Rodriguez, grinned as he checked his weapon systems. "They're about to learn why thinking like that is a mistake. These new ships are faster than anything they've seen before." The hybrid fighters were a perfect example of human adaptability. Dr. Peterson's research teams had reverse-engineered Zeltharian shield technology, but instead of copying it exactly, human engineers had modified it to work with Earth-built systems. The result was spacecraft that looked crude and improvised, but performed better than the original alien designs. Tony's fighter, the Scrapper, was typical of human ingenuity. It used a Zeltharian energy core connected to human-built engines through systems that no alien engineer would ever consider practical. The cockpit was filled with conventional Earth instruments jury-rigged to interface with alien sensors. It should not have worked, but somehow it did. And it worked better than ships that had been designed by civilizations thousands of years more advanced. The squadron launched from their hidden base in the asteroid belt, moving through space with tactics that violated every rule of proper military engagement. Instead of maintaining formation and following predictable flight paths, the human pilots spread out randomly, used asteroid fields for cover, and approached their target from directions that made no strategic sense. The Zeltharian convoy consisted of 3 large transport ships escorted by 6 fighters. The escort pilots had centuries of experience and followed battle tactics that had proven successful across 17 worlds. They maintained perfect formation, covered all logical approach vectors, and prepared to engage any threat with overwhelming firepower applied through disciplined coordination. They were completely unprepared for what happened next. Tony Rodriguez came at them through the middle of an asteroid field, using gravitational slingshots to build impossible speed while staying hidden behind chunks of rock. Lisa Chen approached from directly above the convoy, a direction that alien tactical doctrine considered impossible due to gravitational mechanics. The other human pilots came from angles that seemed to ignore basic physics. The Zeltharian escorts opened fire with their standard energy weapons, but the human ships were no longer where their targeting computers predicted they should be. Tony's ship spiraled through space in a pattern that looked insane, but made him nearly impossible to hit. Lisa's fighter dove toward the convoy while spinning end over end, her modified shields deflecting alien fire in directions that created more confusion. Within minutes, the escort fighters were destroyed and the supply ships were surrendering. The entire engagement had lasted less than 10 minutes, and the human pilots had taken no casualties while capturing vital supplies and equipment. Back on Earth, the ground war had transformed in ways that Admiral Vex Korath found deeply disturbing. Human forces were no longer simply defending cities. They were actively hunting Zeltharian positions, using tactics that seemed to combine military strategy with pure chaos. In the ruins of Detroit, Sergeant Jake Morrison led a team of soldiers, equipped with the latest generation of human-alien hybrid weapons. Their energy rifles were built around captured Zeltharian power cells, but the firing mechanisms were pure human design, more reliable, easier to repair, and somehow more accurate than the originals. "The aliens are holding the factory complex." Jake briefed his team. "Standard doctrine says we should surround them and force a surrender. Instead, we're going to do something they won't expect." His plan was simple and completely insane. Instead of attacking the factory, his team would collapse the underground tunnels that connected it to the alien supply network. Then they would attack from inside the factory using maintenance shafts that alien intelligence had never mapped. It was the kind of plan that would have horrified military academies but perfectly suited soldiers who had learned to think like humans rather than like textbook warriors. The Zeltharians had established defensive positions based on thousands of years of successful military experience. They controlled all logical approaches to the factory, Their weapons covered every possible attack route, and their sensors monitored everything within a mile radius. By every rule of warfare, the position was impregnable. Jake's team ignored the rules completely. They approached through sewer systems that alien engineers had never bothered to map, used explosive charges to create new passages through solid concrete, and emerged inside the factory complex through ventilation shafts that were too small for Zeltharian warriors, but perfect for human soldiers. The battle was over before the aliens realized they were under attack. Jake's team captured the entire position without losing a single soldier. And more importantly, they captured intact alien communications equipment that provided intelligence on enemy movements across the entire continent. Dr. Peterson's research facility had grown from a small underground laboratory into a massive complex, employing thousands of scientists, engineers, and technicians from around the world. The international cooperation was unprecedented. Researchers who had spent their careers competing with each other were now sharing information freely in the face of extinction. "Alex, you need to see this." Dr. Rachel Kim called from her workstation. "We've been analyzing the power systems from the captured supply ships, and I think we've figured out how to build something incredible." The breakthrough was staggering. Zeltharian technology used energy in ways that human science had considered impossible, but human engineers approached the problem differently. Instead of trying to replicate alien methods exactly, they had found ways to achieve the same results using principles that made sense to human minds. "If these calculations are correct," Alex said slowly, "we can build weapons that are more powerful than anything in the Zeltharian fleet. Not just as powerful, more powerful." The implications were revolutionary. For the first time since the invasion began, humans were not just adapting to alien technology, they were surpassing it. The hybrid weapons combined the advanced principles of Zeltharian science with the innovative engineering that had always been humanity's greatest strength. Meanwhile, Admiral Vex Korath faced a crisis that had no precedent in Imperial history. His forces controlled major population centers on Earth, but they were losing ground daily to human counterattacks that seemed to defy logical analysis. Worse, the humans were capturing alien equipment faster than replacements could be manufactured. "Sir," Commander Zekthul reported with obvious distress, "our ground forces are requesting immediate reinforcements. The humans have somehow developed weapons that are superior to our standard equipment." The Admiral studied the battlefield reports with growing alarm. Human forces were no longer using crude chemical explosives and metal projectiles. Their latest weapons fired energy beams that could penetrate Zeltharian armor, and their defensive systems could withstand direct hits from Imperial warships. Most disturbing of all, human tactics had evolved beyond simple adaptation. They were now anticipating Zeltharian moves and setting traps based on predictions of how alien forces would respond. It was as if they had learned to think like their enemies while remaining fundamentally human in their approach to warfare. "Request additional reinforcements from the homeworld," Vex Korath ordered, "and inform High Command that this conquest is taking longer than anticipated." It was the first time in his career that he had been forced to request reinforcements for what should have been a simple planetary occupation. The request would raise questions throughout the Empire about why a primitive species was proving so difficult to subdue. On Earth, the war had transformed humanity in ways that no one had expected. The species that had spent centuries fighting each other had united against a common enemy, and in the process had discovered capabilities they never knew they possessed. The invasion that was supposed to destroy them had instead made them stronger, more innovative, and more dangerous than any alien species the Zeltharian Empire had ever encountered. The Zeltharian invasion began at dawn with dropships descending through Earth's atmosphere like metal rain. Admiral Vex Korath had chosen 12 major cities across different continents for simultaneous assault, expecting the human governments to surrender within hours once they saw the futility of resistance. The plan was simple and had worked perfectly on 17 previous worlds. Lieutenant Colonel Maria Santos crouched behind a concrete barrier in downtown Denver and watched the alien ships land in the city center. She commanded the 3rd Armored Regiment, and her orders were clear: delay the alien advance as long as possible while civilians evacuated. She had 200 soldiers, 30 tanks, and whatever weapons they could gather from nearby military depots. The first Zeltharian warriors emerged from their landing craft with confident, measured steps. They were tall creatures with gray skin and 4 arms, each carrying advanced energy weapons. Their armor gleamed with built-in technology that human scientists could only dream about. They moved in perfect formation, just as they had been trained to do for centuries of conquest. Maria gave the signal, and her tanks opened fire with conventional shells. The explosions rocked the alien formation, but their energy shields absorbed most of the damage. The Zeltharians paused, seeming almost puzzled by the primitive attack, then began returning fire with weapons that could melt steel with single shots. What happened next surprised everyone, especially the aliens. Instead of retreating in panic, as expected, Maria's soldiers adapted instantly to the new threat. They spread out, used the city's buildings for cover, and began analyzing the alien weapons during brief exchanges of fire. Within minutes, human observers were radioing tactical information to other units around the world. Their shields are weaker from behind, Maria reported over the global communication network. Concentrate fire on their rear positions. Their weapons need 3 seconds to recharge between shots. Across the planet, similar battles were erupting as Zeltharian forces encountered human resistance. In Tokyo, Colonel Ken Yamada discovered that alien energy weapons were less effective in heavy rain. In London, Major Catherine Wright found that reflective surfaces could redirect their energy beams. In Cairo, Commander Ahmed Hassan learned that the aliens had trouble targeting fast-moving vehicles in urban environments. Every piece of information was shared instantly across the global defense network. Human forces began modifying their tactics. In real time, something the Zeltharians had never experienced with previous conquests. Other species had fought bravely, but they had fought the same way from beginning to end. Humans seemed to treat each battle as a learning experience. Dr. Alex Peterson worked frantically in his underground laboratory beneath the Colorado mountains. As soon as the first alien weapons had been fired, his team had begun analyzing the energy signatures from satellite data. Within hours, they had started to understand the basic principles behind Zeltharian technology. "It's incredible," he told his assistant, Dr. Rachel Kim, as they studied the data. "Their energy weapons use focused particle beams, but the focusing system has a predictable pattern. If we can build small devices that emit the right frequency, we might be able to disrupt their targeting systems." Rachel looked at the equations covering the whiteboard. "Alex, you're talking about technology that's 50 years ahead of anything we have." "Then we'll have to learn fast," Alex replied, already sketching designs for a portable disruption device. "Send this data to every research facility on the planet. If we're going to survive this, we need every brilliant mind working on the same problem." Back in Denver, Maria Santos was discovering something remarkable about human soldiers. Under extreme pressure, they were not breaking down or panicking as military doctrine suggested they might. Instead, they were becoming more creative, more resourceful, and more dangerous. Her communications specialist, Sergeant Tony Lopez, had figured out how to jam alien communications using modified civilian radio equipment. Her demolitions expert, Corporal Lisa Park, had learned to set traps using conventional explosives that the alien sensors couldn't detect. The Zeltharians were experiencing something completely outside their military training. On previous worlds, primitive species had used the same weapons and tactics throughout their defeat. But these humans changed their approach every few hours. Weapons that had been ineffective in the morning became deadly by afternoon through simple modifications. Tactics that failed against one alien unit were immediately adjusted and used successfully against others. Commander Zek Thule reported to Admiral Vex Korath from the surface of Earth. "Sir, the humans are not behaving as predicted. They adapt to our tactics faster than any species we have encountered. When we destroy one of their positions, 3 more appear using different methods of attack." The Admiral studied the tactical displays showing battles across the human world. His forces were winning, certainly, but the victories were taking much longer than planned and costing more resources than expected. "Perhaps they simply need a stronger demonstration of our capabilities. Increase firepower to maximum levels." The escalation backfired completely. Instead of demoralizing the humans, the increased alien aggression seemed to make them more determined. Stories of heroism began spreading through human communication networks. Maria Santos became famous for holding downtown Denver for 6 hours against overwhelming odds. A pilot named Captain Steve Johnson gained legendary status for ramming his fighter jet into an alien gunship to save a refugee convoy. Dr. Peterson's research team made their first breakthrough after analyzing wreckage from a destroyed alien scout ship. "Rachel, look at this," he said excitedly. "Their power systems use a crystalline matrix that amplifies energy input by a factor of 12. But if we can create a resonance frequency that matches the crystal structure, the whole system would overload," Rachel finished. "Alex, you're talking about building a weapon that could disable their ships." "Not just disable," Alex corrected. "If we can reverse engineer this technology and apply human engineering principles, we might be able to improve on their original design." The concept was revolutionary. While other conquered species had tried to copy alien technology exactly, humans were approaching it differently. They were learning the principles behind the technology and then applying their own innovative methods to create something new. Within weeks, the first human-made energy disruptor devices were being field tested. They were crude, compared to Zeltharian technology built from spare parts and powered by car batteries, but they worked. More importantly, they represented something the Zeltharian Empire had never faced: a primitive species that could not only understand advanced technology, but improve upon it. Maria Santos received one of the first prototype disruptors during the battle for Denver's industrial district. The device looked like nothing more than a modified radio attached to a car antenna, but when her soldiers activated it near Zeltharian positions, the alien weapons began misfiring. Their targeting systems became erratic, their energy shields flickered, and for the first time since the invasion began, human forces were able to advance against alien positions. The news spread rapidly across the global defense network. Human forces around the world began requesting disruptor devices and learning how to build their own versions. The technology that had taken Dr. Peterson's team weeks to develop was being reproduced and modified by mechanics, electricians, and amateur inventors within days. Admiral Vex Korath received increasingly disturbing reports from his ground commanders. The humans were not only adapting to Zeltharian tactics, but were beginning to turn captured alien technology against its creators. It was unprecedented in the Empire's long history of conquest. Most alarming of all, the humans seemed to be getting stronger as the conflict continued rather than weaker. Their initial panic had transformed into grim determination, and their scattered resistance was becoming coordinated warfare. For the first time in his career, Admiral Vex Korath began to consider the possibility that this conquest might not be as easy as he had assumed. Admiral Vex Korath stood on the command deck of his massive warship and watched the blue planet grow larger on his screens. This would be conquest number 18 for the Zeltharian Empire, and like all the others, it would be quick and easy. The intelligence reports showed a young species that still used chemical rockets and fought each other with metal bullets. They called themselves humans, and they seemed to spend most of their time killing each other over small pieces of land and different ideas about invisible gods. The Admiral had conquered 17 worlds in his long career, and each one followed the same pattern. His fleet would arrive, demonstrate superior technology, demand surrender, and within days the primitive species would bow down and accept Zeltharian rule. It was so predictable that he could schedule the victory celebration before the first shot was fired. This human world called Earth would be no different. His second-in-command, Commander Zek Thul, approached with the latest reports. "Admiral, our scouts have finished mapping their defenses. They have several hundred small spacecraft scattered around their planet, and a few basic weapons platforms. Nothing that could threaten even our oldest ships." Vex Korath nodded as he studied the tactical display. The humans had divided themselves into different groups called nations, each with its own military. They spent enormous resources fighting each other instead of working together. It was the mark of a truly primitive species. Advanced civilizations learned long ago that unity brought strength, but these humans seemed determined to remain weak and divided. "What about their communication systems?" the Admiral asked. "Basic radio transmissions mostly. We have intercepted thousands of their entertainment broadcasts. They seem obsessed with stories about war and conflict. Their fictional warriors are depicted as crude and emotional, relying on luck rather than proper strategy. They appear to value individual heroism over disciplined military doctrine. The admiral smiled, showing rows of sharp teeth. This was even better than he had hoped. A species that glorified chaos and individual action would crumble quickly when faced with the organized might of the Zeltharian military machine. His forces had trained together for decades, moving as one unified entity with perfect coordination. No primitive world had ever withstood such disciplined power. Thousands of miles away on Earth, Captain Jake Sullivan sat in the command center of the New Horizon space station and watched his instruments carefully. The massive alien ships had appeared 3 days ago, just beyond the orbit of Mars. Every space agency and military force on Earth was now tracking the unknown vessels as they moved steadily toward their world. Jake had spent 15 years in space, first as a military pilot and then as commander of this research station. He had always wondered if humanity was alone in the universe, but he never expected to find out like this. The alien ships were huge, each one larger than anything humans had ever built. Their technology was clearly far beyond what Earth could produce. The communication system crackled to life. Captain Sullivan, this is General Patricia Barnes at Space Command. Are you receiving the alien transmission? Yes, General. We're picking it up on multiple frequencies. Our computers are working. On translation, but it might take some time. We don't have time, Captain. Those ships will reach Earth orbit in 18 hours. Every government on the planet is trying to figure out what to do. Jake looked out at the approaching alien fleet through the station's main viewport. He had read enough science fiction to know that first contact was supposed to be a moment of wonder and discovery. Instead, he felt a cold fear in his stomach. These ships were not here to make friends. Their formation was clearly military, and they were broadcasting on frequencies typically used for official communications rather than scientific greetings. The translation computer finally provided results. The message was simple and direct. The aliens called themselves the Zeltharian Empire. They demanded that all human military forces surrender immediately and that planetary leaders present themselves for processing into the Empire. Resistance would result in the destruction of major population centers. Jake read the message twice, then opened a channel to Space Command. General, I'm sending you the translation now. They want us to surrender. There was a long pause before General Barnes replied. Captain, I need you to send a response. Tell them that humanity requests a meeting to discuss terms. What should I really tell them, General? Another pause. Tell them no. Jake felt his heart racing as he composed the reply. He had been in combat situations before, but never anything like this. He was about to tell a vastly superior alien force that humanity would not surrender without a fight. It was probably suicide, but something deep inside him refused to simply give up. Meanwhile, aboard the Zeltharian flagship, Admiral Vex Korath received the human response with surprise. In his long career, no species had ever refused his initial demand for surrender. Most civilizations immediately began negotiating terms or begging for mercy. These humans had simply said no. Sir, Commander Zekthul reported. They are requesting a meeting to discuss terms, but they clearly have no intention of surrendering. The Admiral studied the communication again. It was polite, but firm. The humans acknowledged that the Zeltharian fleet was powerful, but they stated that they would not surrender their world without defending it. It was unprecedented. Perhaps they do not understand the situation, Vex Korath said. Begin standard intimidation protocol. Destroy several of their military satellites. Once they see our weapons in action, they will become more reasonable. The Zeltharian ships opened fire with precise energy beams, turning 3 military satellites into glowing debris. The demonstration was calculated to show power while avoiding any loss of life. It was a standard tactic that had worked on every previous world. On Earth, military leaders watched the satellite destruction with grim faces. The alien weapons were incredibly accurate and powerful. However, instead of panic, something else began to happen. Communication networks that had been established for decades suddenly came alive with activity. Military bases that rarely worked together began sharing intelligence. Scientists started collaborating across national boundaries. The threat from outside was doing what no human leader had ever accomplished. It was uniting the species. "Captain." Sullivan watched the alien fleet continue its approach and felt a strange calm settle over him. He was scared, certainly, but he was also determined. Humanity might lose this fight, but they were not going to make it easy for the aliens. He began implementing protocols that had been theoretical until now, plans for defending Earth that every military had hoped they would never need. The Admiral waited for the human response to his demonstration of power, expecting pleas for mercy or offers of negotiation. Instead, he received something that confused him greatly. The humans thanked him for clarifying their intentions and informed him that Earth was now under full military alert. All human forces were being coordinated for planetary defense. Vex Korath had never encountered anything like it. The humans had seen his superior technology in action, and instead of surrendering, they were preparing to fight. It made no tactical sense. They had to know they could not win. The final confrontation above Earth's orbit lasted 3 hours and changed the balance of power in the galaxy forever. Admiral Vex Korath, commanding what remained of the once mighty Zeltharian invasion fleet, watched his tactical displays with growing disbelief as human forces systematically dismantled Imperial battle formations that had been perfected over millennia. Admiral Susan Blake stood on the bridge of the flagship Humanity's Dawn, a massive vessel that had been constructed in orbital shipyards using a combination of human industrial capacity and captured alien technology. The ship represented everything that humanity had become during the war: innovative, determined, and far more dangerous than any enemy had expected. "Status of the Zeltharian fleet?" Susan asked her tactical officer. "Admiral, they're maintaining defensive formation around their command ship, but their escort vessels are taking heavy damage. Our hybrid weapons are penetrating their shields faster than their systems can adapt," Lieutenant Commander Paul Wright reported. Susan nodded as she watched the battle unfold on the main screen. The Zeltharian ships were magnificent examples of advanced technology, sleek and powerful vessels that had conquered 17 worlds. But they were fighting an enemy that no longer respected technological superiority alone. The human fleet that surrounded the alien forces looked crude by comparison. The ships were built from salvaged materials, powered by improvised systems, and armed with weapons that violated every principle of proper military engineering. However, they worked with deadly efficiency because they had been designed by minds that refused to accept limitations. Captain Tony Rodriguez, now commanding his own destroyer called the Underdog, led a squadron of fighters against the Zeltharian escort ships. His vessels moved through space like dancers, using gravitational fields and momentum in ways that alien tactical computers could not predict or counter. "This is Rodriguez to all units," he transmitted. "Remember, we're not trying to outfight them. We're trying to outthink them. Use every trick we've learned." The fighter squadrons scattered across three-dimensional space, approaching the alien fleet from angles that defied conventional tactical doctrine. They used asteroid debris as camouflage, employed slingshot maneuvers around planetary masses, and coordinated their attacks through the hybrid communication network that allowed them to think and act as one unified force while maintaining individual initiative. The Zeltharian defenders responded with tactics that had proven successful across the galaxy. They concentrated firepower on the most obvious threats, maintained disciplined formations, and applied overwhelming force where it would do the most damage. Against any previous enemy, their response would have been devastatingly effective. Against humans who had spent months learning to fight superior technology, it was merely the opening move in a complex game that the aliens were destined to lose. On Earth's surface, the remaining Zeltharian ground forces were experiencing their own version of defeat. General Kevin Burke had not simply driven the aliens from human cities, he had trapped their remaining forces in positions where surrender was their only viable option. The Zeltharian warriors who had landed on Earth expecting easy conquest found themselves surrounded by human soldiers who had learned to use every advantage their homeworld offered. The aliens were trapped in urban environments they did not understand, facing enemies who could move through familiar territory with the confidence of people defending their own homes. Colonel Maria Santos, now commanding the entire North American theater of operations, stood in the ruins of downtown Denver where the ground war had begun 6 months earlier. The city had been rebuilt using alien technology, but the new buildings reflected human architectural principles, practical, efficient, and designed to serve the people who lived in them, rather than impress observers with technological superiority. "The last Zeltharian stronghold is requesting terms for surrender," her communications officer reported. "What terms are they offering?" Maria asked. "Complete withdrawal from Earth, return of all captured human personnel, and reparations for damage caused during the invasion." Maria considered the offer while watching construction crews repair the final damage from the alien occupation. The workers were using tools that combined human engineering with Zeltharian technology, creating buildings that were stronger and more efficient than either species could have built alone. "Accept their terms," she decided, "but add one condition. They must provide complete technical specifications for all the technology they brought to Earth. We've reverse engineered most of it anyway, but we want to make sure we haven't missed anything useful." Back in space, Admiral Vex Korath was experiencing something that no Zeltharian commander had ever faced: total defeat by a supposedly primitive species. His remaining ships were outnumbered, outgunned, and facing weapons that were somehow more advanced than the technology they had been built from. "Admiral," Commander Zekthul reported with obvious distress, "the human fleet is hailing us." The communication from Admiral Blake was brief and professional. "Admiral Vex Korath, you are ordered to surrender your remaining vessels and withdraw from this system immediately. Any attempt to continue hostilities will result in the destruction of your fleet." Vex Korath studied his tactical displays one final time. His forces were surrounded by human ships that defied every principle of proper military engineering but somehow worked better than vessels designed by the galaxy's most advanced civilizations. His warriors were trapped on a planet where the inhabitants had learned to turn every building, every street, and every piece of technology into weapons. Most importantly, he was facing an enemy that had done something unprecedented in galactic history. They had not simply survived contact with superior alien technology, they had mastered it and made it better. "Signal the human fleet," he ordered. "We surrender unconditionally." Dr. Alex Peterson watched the surrender ceremony from his laboratory, now expanded into a research complex that employed scientists from every nation on Earth. The international cooperation that had been forced by the alien invasion had continued, even after the threat was over, as researchers realized how much more they could accomplish by working together rather than competing. "It's hard to believe it's over," Dr. Rachel Kim said as they monitored the departure of the last Zeltharian ships. "It's not over," Alex replied, "already working on plans for humanity's next phase of development. It's just beginning. We've learned how to build ships that can travel between stars, weapons that can defend our world from any threat, and most importantly, we've learned that we're not alone in the universe." The alien technology that humanity had captured and improved would allow them to explore beyond their solar system, not as potential victims but as a species that had proven it could defend itself against any threat. The war had transformed them from a divided planet into a unified civilization ready to take its place among the stars. Captain Jake Sullivan, still commanding the New Horizon station, now expanded into a major orbital facility, watched the last Zeltharian ships disappear into hyperspace. The aliens who had arrived expecting easy conquest were leaving with the knowledge that they had awakened something unprecedented in the galaxy. Admiral Susan Blake addressed the combined human fleet as the alien ships departed. "Today marks the end of the invasion, but it also marks the beginning of humanity's future among the stars. We've proven that we can defend our world against any threat. Now we're going to prove that we belong in the galaxy as equals to any species we might encounter." The transformation of humanity was complete. The species that had been fighting each other over small differences 6 months ago had become something that even they had not expected. A unified civilization that combined the best aspects of human creativity with technology beyond their previous dreams. Admiral Vex Korath, as his fleet limped back toward Zeltharian space, composed his report to Imperial Command. It would be the most difficult document he had ever written, explaining how the Empire's military doctrine had been defeated by a species that refused to fight according to established rules. The humans had done something that no other species in galactic history had accomplished. They had not simply adapted to superior alien technology. They had improved it through principles that made no sense to established civilizations, but worked with devastating effectiveness. Most disturbing of all, the humans had enjoyed the challenge. Where other species had fought desperately for survival, humans had treated the war as an opportunity to learn, grow, and become something greater than they had been before. They were not just survivors. They were a species that became stronger through adversity. The galaxy would never be the same. The Zeltharian Empire, which had built its power on the assumption that technological superiority guaranteed conquest, would have to reconsider its entire approach to expansion. Other alien civilizations would hear the story of Earth and realize that the universe contained species that could not be conquered through conventional means. Humanity had announced its presence in the galaxy, not as supplicants seeking acceptance, but as equals who had earned their place through the most rigorous test possible, surviving and defeating an invasion by forces that should have been impossibly superior.